Narcotics. Well, if you can name them, Michael Thornton was addicted to them. He knew that drugs were killing him, but every time he tried to stop, he found that his life was getting more and more out of control.
Growing up, I grew up in a Christian home. Pretty much knew the difference between right and wrong. When I turned 15, my life started to change. I started hanging out with some friends. I loved playing sports. And I started hanging out with some guys that played sports, but that didn't grow up the way I grew up. We were sitting on the front porch, and my friend took out a joint. And he lit up the joint, and he smoked it, and he said, "You want to get high?" I knew not to do this. I knew this was wrong. I had been taught this my whole life from my mother and father. However, the peer pressure and the acceptance, I wanted to be accepted so bad, I couldn't say no. So I gave in and I got high, and I began to smoke weed and marijuana. But it wasn't enough. It led to other things like cocaine. And after cocaine, I started using crystal meth. And then after crystal meth, I began to use ecstasy, Percocets and Xanax, all kinds of prescription pills. I began to dabble in all these drugs. However, I found my true love, which was crack cocaine. And crack cocaine became my drug of choice. I was truly lost. I had no sense of direction. I had no sense of purpose. My whole life was fueled by doing drugs and drinking and partying. I really wanted a change in my life because I knew everything was falling apart. I thought by joining the military, it would be the most honorable thing to do. Was to get out of the environment that I was in. You see, I was in this town that was surrounded by all my old friends and all my old buddies. In my mind, if I could get in the military and go abroad elsewhere, then I can start my life over. I can rebuild my life. When the orders came out, I was stationed at Jacksonville, North Carolina for 4 years, which was my very hometown, the town that I was trying to escape. I was around my old friends, and cocaine came back into the picture. In the Marine Corps, I had crossed this line. You got to understand something. I was the local boy. I knew where all the drugs were. I knew where I could get stuff for other Marines. So I'd set up a little drug ring, and I'd sell heroin, crack, crystal meth, ecstasy to other Marines, take that money and supply my own habit. And in the result, I would have other Marines that would take urinalysis tests for me so I wouldn't get caught. Then one night, my drill instructor gave me a surprise urinalysis test. They took me into custody right then. My first sergeant pretty much said after he read the rights, he looked at me and he said, "Thornton, I don't know how you're alive today." He said, "We have found so much cocaine in your system, you should be clinically dead." At that time, they apprehended me and they took me into the mental asylum on Camp Lejeune because they thought I was suicidal, that I had so much in my system that I was trying to kill myself. After 3 weeks, I played the game. I told the doctors what they wanted to hear because I wasn't done yet. I wanted to go deeper. Even to the last day before I got out of the mental institution, I was making a phone call to my dope man to organize another drop to get more drugs. One night out of the ordinary, I had snuck out of the base. I had got in my car and I left the base and I went into the town. I was going to this crack house to get my usual order. I had crack cocaine in my hand. I was high as a kite. I went to knock on the door, and when I did, all I heard was, "Get on the ground, get on the ground, get on the ground." Agents had come out of the bushes. The house was being surveillanced by DEA, by drug enforcement, law enforcement all over the place. They took me into custody, battered down the door, and took about 7 of us to jail that night in a drug raid. You got to understand something. I wasn't supposed to leave my room in the base, but here I am at 4:30 in the morning across town in the Marine Corps uniform, strung out on crack cocaine, caught in a drug raid. My first sergeant and my colonel of my battalion knew the situation that I was in. They knew how bad I was in drugs. But you see, I was a hard worker in the Marine Corps, and I did well at my job. They knew this. So they wanted to work a deal out with me. So they visited me in the prison. And they said, "We'll get you out. And we'll wash our hands away from you in the Marine Corps. We'll give you an other than honorable discharge. And we'll release you from this prison. And we're going to kick you out of the military." At this point in my life, I became pretty much homeless. I was addicted to crack. So naturally, I went into crack houses. And I got hooked up with the drug dealers. And I went through cars. I went through bonds. I went through tools. I went through jewelry, my mom and dad's. I sold everything. I pawned everything. I became so bad and so wrapped up in drug addiction that I reached a point in my life where I had to sell myself. I became a prostitute on the streets. And I began to engage in homosexuality with other men so that I could get high, so that I could keep doing drugs, because this is how bad the addiction was. I couldn't stop. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. This went on. I said, I got to get out of this life. I was staying with a drug dealer at this time. And I said, if I could rob him, if I could take his money and his drugs, then maybe I can get out of town and I can start over. So one night I waited for him to fall asleep. He fell asleep, I robbed him, and I left. As I was leaving the town, I made a stop somewhere and pulled over, and what I didn't know is this guy woke up and he found me. He looked at me and said, you got 1 hour to give me $400, the money that I robbed, or that I was going to die. I was going to be murdered. At this time, I didn't know who to call. You got to understand, I totally did everybody wrong in my life, from my family to my friends. I robbed them. I was a horrible man. I did so much wrong to everybody. Who was going to help me in this time?
That night he called and he said that he needed money because the crack dealer was going to kill him. And I think that was the point. I said, well, let him do it. Let him kill you, son. And I hung up. Not thinking that that was really the truth. I just thought he was telling me that. But then he called again right after that, and I said, here's, Richard, please pick up this phone.
I told him, I said, Mike, you know, there's got to be a change. There's got to be a change here. And if you'll agree to go get help, we're going to go get you help, and I'll pay the drug dealer off. Tell him not to kill you. If you promise me that you'll go with me to get help. And I brought him here to the Potter's Wheel.